So you have raced against pretty much all of the greatest pilots in the world, and I know that you might say that you are that number one, and I think that you definitely have a case to make. I'm curious, without saying yourself, what's your Mount Rushmore of drone pilots? Who do you think top four
Yeah.
against anybody like these guys are using that?
It's hard, man, because again, we talked about it earlier with there's different eras of drone racing, and what they had to deal with in 2016 is different than what guys have to challenge themselves with now.
Sure.
2016, 17, even earlier than that, a lot of it was who had the mentality just to finish the race, and that was hard. Versus now, it's like, man, you watch multi-GP 2024 champs, and it's like, man, these guys are so fast. I'm honest with myself, and probably up until this year, I was like, man, I could come back, and if I just dedicated myself, I could finish the top four. And I'm looking now, I'm like, I don't know. Those guys, I'd have to like really grind it. So with that, I think with all that in consideration, I'll kind of throw out some names. If I didn't throw out Heads Up, I feel like that would just be, disrespectful. I think he's definitely up there. I think one thing I'll say about each of these names, I'll kind of point out kind of like what I think makes them belong on that list and why. I think one thing that I will give Heads Up is Evan has probably the strongest mental game out of any drone racer, including Minchan, including myself. I think that guy knows how to dig deep. He really does. I've seen it firsthand. We've had this rivalry. I think that's going to give him a huge edge going into this season over guys like MCK. So I think that in terms of also just his racing craft, look at his accomplishments. He's won multi-GP 3 times now, 4 times. He's won DRL twice. However it may be that he won that. And he's got how many ever accolades and accomplishments. He's won the Turkey World Championship, multi-GP International Open. I think that there's like 4 Grand Slams in drone racing. You have multi-GP champs, IO, you have DRL, and you have FAI. And Evan has won 3 of those 4. I've won 3 of those 4. There's only one person who's won all 4, which we'll get into in a minute. Or maybe it's actually won all 4. But, well, anyways, so Evan's on that list. You have Minchan, Kim, of course, on that list. Minchan is just, I don't think anyone would disagree in terms of raw piloting skill. There's just no better drone pilot in the world, period. I've seen it firsthand. I remember I raced against Minchan in 2017 for the first time. I knew he was special. I got to go live in South Korea for a couple months. I got to train with Minchan a lot.
Oh, wow.
We trained in parking garages because it was so darn cold outside. And parking garages are brutal on 5-inch quads, let me just tell you what. And I've just seen Minchan do some things firsthand. The most notable one was in DR1, 2018. We did a head-to-head race, and I called him out for it. I knew it was a big challenge, and I knew that deep down, but I had such a run of momentum going into that final event of the year that I just like, this is it. This is going to set up a story. I'm always about setting up stories for myself. And long story short, I crashed out like instantaneously. I just was not ready. I got better after that, but Minchan goes on, and it wasn't in his mind enough that I just like, he could have just finished the race. No one would have questioned Minchan is a better pilot, or, he won the race. But he goes on at this course. And if you watch DR1, we did this building dive as part of the track. And these 5-inch quads flew good, but they did not like track very well. People, I hate it when these kids say they like watch 2018. They're like, dude, you guys suck. Like, I'm not even gonna say the names, but like, I'm like, dude, don't even get me angry. Cause like, you have no idea what you're talking about. How good Minchan is now, and you can see him fly then, and he was not trash. Point is, Minchan goes full throttle, and I watched him. I was right next to him. He never let off the throttle, and just all the way down the building through these tiny triangle gates. And it's probably the most impressive thing I've ever seen with a quad. Just the amount of screw you attitude and the amount of skill to be able to do that. I mean, he's fierce. He's also an extremely fierce competitor. I'm not trying to say like, he doesn't have a tough mental game either, but I mean, just watching him do that, there's no doubt he's on that list. He's got a lot of accomplishments. He's won champs. He's won the International Open. He's won DRL. Come to think of it, I don't know if he's actually won FAI. So like there's
Team Korea came in first place, and it was, I think, a team between him and Min Jae. Yeah, Min Jae Kim?
Yeah, Min Jae.
Yes.
But I'm curious, I'm not trying to take away, but I'm curious if he actually won, because there's the individual race and the team race. And one thing I'll say about FAI is like, I think every one of those Grand Slams requires a different set of skills. Some of them require more luck. I think FAI requires the most amount of luck out of any of them for sure. There's obviously been a lot of drone racing drama regarding FAI. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt with what you said and say that he's won FAI. So if there was like one person to win all four, it's definitely been Minchan.
Yeah.
You know, there's been other events and stuff like that too. So Minchan's on there. I think, okay, I can't include myself. So that gives 2 more spots. That's a tough one. I would say Sean Taylor's definitely got to be on that list. Sean won 2016, 2017. He went in to lead, you know, he was on my DR1 team. We won DR1 together. He won before that as well with Minchan. I think that at that time and generation, Sean was the most dedicated person above Minchan, above myself. Sean Taylor injured himself and I had to take a year off of drone racing. Basically, he came back on and we were on the same team. And I mean, from the start of that 2018 DR1 season to the end, at the beginning of the season, I could just wipe the floor with Sean. But then by the end of the season, it was really hard to beat him. And, you know, everyone talks about age, but Sean's like 36 at this point. And the ability for him to be able to just lock in and study my flying and Minchan's flying and be able to close that gap was just really a testament to, I think, his skill and dedication for the sport. I don't think you're going to find also a nicer individual. I mean, maybe Thomas Bitmato, who I'll talk about, but I mean, those guys have a love for the sport and a passion. So yeah, Sean Taylor's definitely on that list. This guy is such a representative for the sport. He probably would be the one person if we had to like pick an individual to go represent us in the Olympics. You know, of course there'd be multiple, but Sean has to be on that list. Even now, honestly, I'd say Sean's on that list. Not just because, you know, he's a fast drone racing pilot, but that man loves the sport. He loves people, and it's super apparent in his life. So That's 3. 4th one. This is a tough one because I would have probably said different name a couple months ago, but I think very quickly this name is these two are like a tie for 4th. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to do a tie for 4th, but
it's all right.
I'm gonna say tie for 4th. Thomas Bitmata and Killian, and I think Killian is quickly rising up there.
Whoa.
Killian might shock a couple people with that name, but if you've been watching the sport the last year, not living under a rock, you would see why. Because again, we look at all these Grand Slam races, I like to refer to them as, and probably like 2 dozen people have ever won any of these. So you're talking about a list of 20 pilots, maybe 24, let's say. But then that list shortens when you win 2 of them to like 10 pilots, maybe 15, maybe. I don't think 15. I think 10. I could name them all in my head. 3 would be really tough. And so Killian has won the Multi-GP International Open. He's won FAI. He has not won champs. He has not won DRL, but I certainly believe he can do both. You know, I also kind of throw in the reason I put him on that list is he won the Pro Spec race at Multi-GP International Open, and he won the World Cup. And one of the things I saw in Killian in this last couple of years I've known Killian, because he shows up to DRL in this last season. He doesn't have a good start. All of a sudden, this fierce competitor that I remember from 5-inch racing, and just has no confidence whatsoever. And then by the end of the season, he built that confidence up. And I kept telling Killian, maybe it's pride, I don't know, but I kept telling Killian, I said, dude, you need to get that, for lack of a better term, that like F you attitude. Like this is the difference between, not in terms of pilot skill, because the pilot skill is there, but this is the difference in Heads Up, Minchan, myself, and some of these other guys that you don't have. But you can get that. You can train that. And I was watching the Multi-GP International Open this year. I got on Facebook the morning of, and I predicted the top 3 perfectly, by the way. I said Yuki, Drobot, Killian, some order. Right, I was right. I know the sport, even though I don't fly 5-inch anymore, really. And one of the things I saw in Killian was after like having a rough start to that finals, where I think, Drobot got a dub, and then Yuki got one. I could just see Killian sit down, and he had this like LeBron James just like death stare on him. And I remember I was sitting next to one of my family members who doesn't know a thing about drone racing, and I said, this kid's going to win this whole thing right now. I knew from the whole shot, he's going to win the whole thing. Because it was like, at that moment, it all clicked. He was like, I know I'm better than these guys, and I'm going to go prove it.
If you're looking to learn more about drone racing and get involved in the drone racing community, another great free resource is the Drone Racing Network page on Discord. There are channels to both talk about professional racing going on around the world, as well as a place for you to show off your own racing content. Additionally, you can ask questions to pro pilots and find members in your community to race with. It's our one-stop shop for all of your drone racing needs. You can scan this QR code or click the link in the description below to get plugged in.
one of the things I tell like Drobot and some of these other guys who are right there, I'm like, you have to learn after you win that first race to like grab it and take it. You kind of just like, oh, it's okay. I'm happy to be here. You got to learn to grab it. And Killian has done that. And I think with Killian winning 2 of those Grand Slam races, as I like to call them, being on track to win more, I just think that he's developed that attitude where if he's not on the Mount Rushmore now, he's going to be. He's a threat, man. He's a threat. He's going to be a huge threat, this coming season. I think he's definitely on that list. I throw out Thomas Bitmata. I don't mean to be short on that list and not throw him on there. I think Thomas has accomplished so much in the sport. He's won Multi-GP International Open twice. I don't know who else has won it twice. Maybe Evans won it twice, but he's one of the few guys to win that race twice. He hasn't won a Champs or an FAI or a DRL or anything like that, but Thomas has won pretty much everything else. If you consider like all the Master 1000 races or whatever, he's won them all. So I mean, he is also another great representative of the sport. I love that kid to death. He is one of the most disciplined individuals you'll ever meet in drone racing. He studies his craft. He makes his quads perfect. Him and his dad are the best team in all of drone racing. Nicest guys. I wish nothing but the best for him. And he's still drone racing at the highest level. I think he's one of the guys. You look at the roster of pilots just kind of flying across the world, and for the most part, Thomas is still there. He's been there since before I was there. So, I feel like that number 4 has got to go between one of those two. I would probably if I didn't throw either one of those people on there, I'd throw myself on that list, and I would say it'd be Evan, MCK, Sean, and myself would be the top 4. And I wouldn't pick an order because I think every one of us has a different skill for a different era of drone racing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool that you mentioned Killian. I mean, he last year did an incredible job, and I mostly keep up with DRL stuff, but came back to win some championships this year, which props to him. He's done some amazing stuff. And then I look at, and you would know the sport better than me, but I have a feeling, again, if he can get that absolute killer mentality, I think Pavelos has it in him. Same with Killian, like you were saying. I just don't know if he last season was like mentally completely locked in. I think it kind of got to him, but I mean, he's got the skill set. He just needs to really, really lock in.
I like Pavelos, man. Pavelos and I think what it was that I wrote him after he won the 2024 Multi-GP Championship, and I'm like, GG, bro, but you still suck. But this, I actually don't think he sucks. I think he's one of the best guys in the sport right now, for sure. I think that was a big breakthrough race for him. And I think that obviously at any race, things have to go in your favor, but I think he definitely earned it that night. He definitely looked like the best guy in the finals, for sure. And that's really what matters. That's where champions are built, is not through however many races you won. It's all about the ones that count, right?
Yeah.
And he handled that pressure well. And I loved the way he talked on the mic afterwards in his interview. And I love the confidence. I think that, he definitely has the ability to go up there. And again, another threat for DRL, but we'll see. There's so many exciting names. I mean, you could pick any one of them on any given day and they could be the best. It really just comes down to slight, small differences in mentality, I think, between the pilots. And that really differentiates, the guys who are on that Mount Rushmore list as well from, the guys who are very close to it, but not quite there.
Yeah, no, I agree. The leagues that we've been talking about, there's FAI, there's Multi-GP, there's DRL. Those are some of the biggest 3. Street leagues up there, DCL. You have a bunch of tiny whoop leagues, things like that. Do you think that because of the fan base, there's enough room for so many leagues, or do you think that in order to be sustainable, there needs to be some bit of a fan base and not just like the pilots, and then it will whittle down to just a few? Or what are your thoughts on kind of the future of drone racing there?
It's a good question. I mean, I've been in it long enough to see leagues come and go, and seeing the ones like Multi-GP, DRL that have kind of stayed through it. I think competition is what the sport needs. I think that if we have one league just dominating the whole sport, right, kind of creates a problem where no one's there to challenge that league. No one's there to make it better. And I think one of the things that made DRL so good back in 2018, 2019 was that DR1 and DCL were doing these live races, and it pushed DRL to try and innovate and make a new drone and make the sport even more competitive and bring on the best pilots. And so if you kind of eliminate the competition, I think it kind of makes the sport less interesting. And I think the pilots too, we want to race in different environments. We don't want to be locked into one singular league and just fly Racer 4. We want to fly 5-inch quads. We want to go do team racing. I think that what the sport does need, though, is you definitely need to some degree differentiate who's doing what. So I think DCL has team racing nailed down to a science. I would love to see them get back to real racing like they did in 2018.
Yeah.
Selfishly, because that's actually on all the things that I've done, that is the one thing I have not done is DCL. And so I would love to be able to do that. And I think DRL's got the spec racing down. I think that there's a way for DRL to work with someone like a street league or something like that in order to create a clear path. Because what DRL needs is they need a really clear path on this is how you become a DRL pilot. They've had it in the past. They need to kind of do that again, I think. And then you have your multi-GP, which, they represent the grassroots drone racing, clear path on how to get into it, your local chapter, your local club, become a multi-GP champion, flying a 5-inch quad. Now it looks like they're going in a whole different additional direction with the pro spec, which is really exciting for me because it just looks like something that get me personally excited, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I think every league needs to have kind of a place, which I think they do. I think that competition is good between them as well, versus just having like one league just kind of dominating the whole sport and having no one to challenge them.
And DCL also has the big drone, I think is what they call it. Sure. I don't know if anything will ever come from that. I know air speeder or whatever. There is a league out there that they're trying to get in these like.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think. Yeah, we'll see if that ever actually catches on. It would be sweet, but we'll see.
Hey, I mean, we'll see. I definitely wish them the best of luck. I think it's cool. I don't know if I'd ever get in one myself. I've talked to those airspeeder guys before. Really, really smart, talented group of people and individuals. I don't think that's drone racing's future, though. I just don't really see a world. I think one of the things that makes drone racing cool, and I was just thinking back just now to Miami, is these spectators come and they've never seen a drone race before, and they see these drones crash all the time, and the crashing is spectacular, especially in DRL. And I think one of the things that allows the sport to be able to have that many crashes is the fact that we're not actually in the drones. Like, people go to NASCAR because a lot of people go to NASCAR, they want to see a car crash, but there's a human involved, whereas we crash a drone and we just take our goggles off. Right. But I think the benefit of that is we're able to push these things to the limit because there is, in a sense, no sense of consequence or fear. And I think if that part of the sport gets taken away, then I think that takes a special part of what makes it interesting and just throws it in the trash. So I think definitely the airspeeder thing is cool, but I think we need to really focus more on developing the spec racing side of things, the 5-inch side of things, to be more entertaining, even though it's already entertaining, and convey that to an audience so that way they can become fans of the sport and of the pilots and everything like that.
Yeah, there's the folks that are trying to do more of the riding in the drone kind of piloting. There's that, which we'll see if that ever catches on. I'm skeptical as well. And then there's also a lot of companies, mainly DRL, but DCL obviously is doing all sim races, that are putting a lot of eggs into the basket of virtual reality and sim racing in VR and things like that. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on do you think there is an actual future there? I mean, it gets into Infinite Reality's buyout of the DRL, and obviously they're a company that is so much invested into AR, VR, all that stuff. Do you think there's a place for that, or do you just think that people want to see in-person crashes, and that's the exciting part of the drone racing that you just don't get with simulators?
I just think that from my experience, I used to be able to see a world where at least the simulator racing was a part of drone racing in some way, shape, or form. And I think there will be a place for it. I think there needs to be a place for it because I think the sim is a great way for people to get into the sport. And if you legitimize the sim, it legitimizes the ability for an average person to be able to become a drone racing world champion. They start on an Xbox maybe or PlayStation or a PC, and they learn to fly and they save a lot of money that way. So I think there needs to be a place for it, and doing some type of simulator competition like legitimizes the sport to a degree. However, there's no secret from my opinion that I think that the IRL, we used to have to differentiate. We used to say drone racing is much more entertaining to watch. If you've ever been to a big event, you would know this. You just see this spectacle for the first time, and people who've never cared a thing about drones or anything like that walk away huge fans. I mean, I get to talk to all these fans in Miami this last season, and these kids are coming up and be like, I want to be a drone racing world champion. It's the coolest thing to see, right? And it's because of how much of a spectacle the real sport of drone racing is. It's always been a spectacle. The hard part is finding locations to do it, how to bring an audience in there to watch it. But DRL in general, as well as DCL, they've done a good job at figuring it out. It just costs a lot of money. And I think the sim is a cheaper alternative to doing that. But there's a lot of fundamental problems with it. The drones aren't colliding. We would finish a race and no one's in front of me. And it's like, did I get it? Did I get it? And then, oh, I got sixth place because of the ping delay.
Right.
I think it's one of the reasons the sports kind of was quiet this last year in 2024. Outside of multi-GP, DRL did nothing. And I think it's because years and years of sim racing kind of just made people lose interest. You can see it on social media. You can see it in other places. It's just every stranger I talk to, whether they know me or not, so there's no bias. They're just like, yeah, I watched it, but the sim stuff, I just can't understand it. I can't get into it. And I think DRL tried it. I think it was a valiant effort, but it's time to focus on the real racing.
Yeah, I think the simulator, you put it just right. The simulator races need to have somewhat of a place, whether that is for qualifying or for like a preseason or something along those lines. For people who don't love the sport, and even for people who do love the sport, obviously, but for people who don't love the sport, it's harder to track with, it's harder to understand. And I don't even really like watching esports in general, but if I do, there are more entertaining esports than watching six little dots roam around a screen. It's just like very difficult to get that into simulator stuff. So I couldn't agree with more with you. I think you're spot on. There's so much more that we dive into the full interview. And if you're enjoying this and want to continue the conversation with Vanover, head on over to my Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. The full 80-minute interview is packed with even more insights, and your support helps me bring you content just like this.